On Saturday, the 21st of September 2013, unidentified gunmen attacked the upmarket Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, Kenya. The attack resulted in at least 67 deaths, and more than 175 people were reportedly wounded in the mass shooting. The extremist Islamic group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the incident, which it characterized as retribution for the Kenyan military's deployment in the group's home country of Somalia. Many media outlets also suspected the insurgent group's involvement in the attack based on earlier reprisal warnings it had issued in the wake of Operation Linda NCHI from 2011 to 2012. Kenyan authorities arrested dozens of people in the aftermath of the attack but had not announced any suspects directly related to the siege. On 4 November 2013, a Kenyan court charged 4 Somali nationals with harboring the gunmen in their homes, with each pleading not guilty. On September 20, 2015, Foreign Policy magazine reported the Westgate attack on September 21 lasted several hours, with the last victim killed before special Kenyan security forces entered the mall, which was also corroborated by New York City Police Department, HBO, and United States Army. The mall was officially declared secured on 24 September. Background: the incident followed threats from Al-Shabaab in late 2011 of attacks in Kenya in retaliation for Operation Linda NCHI, a coordinated military operation in southern Somalia that was launched against the group by the Somali Armed Forces and Kenya Defense Forces. 1 week before the incident and a month after United Nations warnings of possible attacks, Kenyan police claimed to have disrupted a major attack in its final stages of planning after arresting 2 people with grenades, AK-47 assault rifles, and suicide vests packed with ball bearings. The 2 suspects were from a Nairobi neighborhood where Somali immigrants live. A manhunt was also launched for 8 more suspects. The Sunday Telegraph claimed that it had seen United Nations documents that warned that in the previous month the threat of an attempted large-scale attack in Kenya was elevated. After the incident, Nairobi Senator Mike Sonko claimed that he had warned the security services of a possible attack 3 months previously. The country was celebrating the International Day of Peace when the incident took place. Shootings and initial siege. On Saturday, the 21st of September 2013, at about noon, at least 4 masked assailants attacked the upscale Westgate shopping mall in the Westlands district of Nairobi. Fighting with armed police continued over 48 hours later. Cameras in the mall revealed the gunmen carried assault rifles and wore civilian clothing. There were additional reports of grenade explosions. Police surrounded the area and urged residents to stay away. A report indicated that about 80 people were trapped in the basement, but police said that they had escorted some shoppers to safety and were trying to capture the gunmen. The Secretary-General of the Kenya Red Cross Society, Abbas Gullett, said that rescue workers could not reach some of the patrons in the mall. Inspector General of Police David Kirmayo wrote that there were police at the scene and the area is surrounded. Rob van Dijk, an employee of the Dutch embassy, said that while he was eating at a restaurant, the attack started with grenades and was followed by gunfire as patrons screamed and dropped to the ground. Other witnesses said the attack began at the outdoor seating area of Art Cafe at the front of the mall. An Art Cafe employee, Patrick Curia, said, "We started by hearing gunshots downstairs and outside. Later we heard them come inside. We took cover. Then we saw 2 gunmen wearing black turbans. I saw them shoot. Some of the casualties were at the entrance to the mall after the assailants moved outside and a standoff then commenced with police. Ambulances were present at the mall as rescuers started moving emerging victims." Reports indicated children were among the victims, and patrons that were carrying small children were among those trapped. Mall security guards used shopping carts to ferry out wounded children. Nation TV footage showed dozens of people escaping from a back entrance. Bloomberg correspondent Marco Louis was on the second floor of the mall when the attack started. He said that 2 explosions happened within about 5 minutes of each other. We heard a noise from the ground floor and people started running to the parking area on the rooftop. They were panicking, and then the second blast went off and people were even more panicked. Other eyewitnesses said that in addition to grenades, the attackers used AK-47s. 20 people were rescued from a toy shop on the upper floor. As the Kenyan army troops arrived, they used tear gas to try to smoke out the attackers from the cinema complex. Vehicles riddled with bullet holes were left abandoned in front of the mall. Kimayo said, "Our officers are on the ground carrying out an evacuation of those inside as they search for the attackers who are said to be inside." A police officer said that the gunmen were barricaded inside the Nakumatt supermarket. He indicated that there were 3 bodies there while he pointed to a pool of blood by a children's shoe shop. He then pointed to a hamburger bar where music still played and indicated more bodies were found there. Rescue efforts. Goran Tomasevic, Reuters chief photographer for East Africa, recorded the first few hours of the attacks, in which he described extremely distressed people including children, women and men bleeding from the impact of shrapnel and gunshots. Abdul Yusuf Haji, son of former Defense Minister of Kenya Mohamed Yusuf Haji, on receiving text messages from his brother, an undercover anti-terrorism agent who was stuck inside the shopping center, traveled to the mall with his handgun and entered with other civilian rescuers. He helped rescue a mother and her 3 daughters, providing cover with other armed rescuers. Tomasevic's photographs of the rescue efforts by civilians were beamed all around the world. By nightfall, the mall remained sealed off to the public while security services searched floor by floor for the gunmen, believed to still be inside with the hostages. People continued to trickle out from hiding places. Internal Security Minister Mutare Iringo then said that the government was in control of the situation. Kimayo also wrote that several of the other assailants had been pinned down after security forces moved into the mall. President Uhuru Kenyatta said the security operation was delicate, and that a top priority was to safeguard hostages. At about 2:30, an hour after reporting 5 visibly shaken hostages' release, the National Disaster Operations Center wrote that major operations underway. The next evening, after nightfall, over 24 hours after the beginning of the attack, gunfire was still heard at the mall. The military spokesman, Colonel Cyrus Ogane, said that most of the hostages had been released, saying that they were dehydrated and suffering from shock. He added that 4 Kenyan soldiers were injured in the rescue operation. Scores of bystanders gathered by the mall as the operations continued. The NDOC forecast that the operation would end that night. Kenyatta said to the nation that the criminals are now all located in one place within the building. We have as good a chance to successfully neutralize the terrorists as we can hope for. He also called for patience and said that he had received numerous offers of assistance from friendly countries. On the 23rd of September, Lenku assured that, "We are doing anything reasonably possible, cautiously though, to bring this process to an end," and said that at least 3 al-Shabaab fighters were killed and 10 Kenyan soldiers wounded. 11 other soldiers were also injured that day, and 3 Kenyan commandos were shot at close range. It was also reported that 3 floors of the mall collapsed during the attack, trapping some bodies inside. On the night of 23-24 September there was a lull in firing, but it resumed in the early morning hours. As the day progressed, police said that they were conducting a final sweep of the complex as the Interior Ministry released a statement that said the 4-day-long assault was very near the end. The gunmen were still inside. He vowed full accountability for the mindless destruction, deaths, pain, loss and suffering we have all undergone. The Kenyan Red Cross said that 63 people were still missing. In Nairobi, daily business returned to normal, appeals replenished blood banks, and over $650,000 was raised to support the affected families. Israeli involvement at the time of the attacks. The mall was owned by Israelis, and at least 4 restaurants in the mall are owned, operated by Israelis, according to Israeli sources. The International Business Times stated that Kenya and Israel had a secret security pact. Israeli military advisors were reported to have participated in the counter-offensive against the hostage-takers and to have joined in the fighting. Although the Israeli Foreign Ministry refused to confirm or deny the presence of its forces looting in the days following the initial attack, Kenyan soldiers were reported to have looted almost every shop in the mall while it was in lockdown. 2 soldiers were arrested and jailed for looting mobile phones and several others were questioned. Victims during the siege and for days afterwards. The toll of casualties remained very unclear. Eyewitnesses were reported to have seen 50 bodies in the mall. In addition, at first there were reported hostages taken by attackers, but later it became apparent no hostages were ever held. Other eyewitnesses also said that they had seen dozens wounded. An unnamed local hospital reported that it was overwhelmed with the number of wounded being brought in and that it had consequently diverted victims to a second facility. At least 67 people were killed, possibly including 4 terrorists. In addition to numerous Kenyans who were killed, at least 19 foreigners of different nationalities also died. The National Disaster Operations Center said that the wounded ranged in age from 2 to 78. Sources said 175 people were wounded, including 11 soldiers. There are also claims of torture carried out by the terrorists. Notable victims included Kenyan journalist Ruhila Adesha President Uhuru Kenyatta's nephew Mabigwa Mwangi and his fiancée, Ghanaian poet and diplomat Kofi Awuno and Canadian diplomat Anne-Marie Desloges. Kenyan Interior Minister Joseph Ole Lenku said Israelis were not targeted. This time, the story is not about Israel. The minister is saying that this is an internal Kenyan issue. His security forces tell him that this terror organization was not targeting Israelis. Most of the victims were from Kenya's business and political elite, as well as expatriates and the diplomatic community. Investigation. British police officers based in Kenya arrived on the scene to help Kenyan counter-terrorism officials, and Kenyan officials began an investigation. Security was also tightened in public places across Kenya. 10 arrests were reported on the 24th of September. In announcing the end of operations, Kenyatta said, "Forensic investigations are underway to establish the nationalities of all those involved," and suggested that a British woman and 2 or 3 U.S. citizens may have been involved in the attack, but that could not be confirmed at the time. Kenyan Defense Chief, General Julius Karangi, said the attackers were from different countries. The National Intelligence Service was strongly criticized for failing to warn of the attack, after the Star reported that 2 unnamed NIS officers had told it that the NIS had passed warnings about an attack to the police, and that a pregnant woman had been warned by her brother, a NIS officer, not to visit the Westgate Mall that Saturday, because she would not be able to run with her bulging tummy. The Observer reported that Kenya had prior intelligence of an attack in Nairobi, and that there were reports of NIS agents being at Westgate a few hours before the attack. From its start, the investigation was hampered by a wide range of conflicting eyewitness testimony about the number of attackers, the gunmen's true identities, and even their ultimate fates. Over 60 persons were listed by the Red Cross as missing, though police asserted that they were all among the dead. In news reports, some have been described as additional terrorists who escaped alive, though the Kenyan government firmly denies this. It was reported on the 10th of October that the police, army, and intelligence services had been engaging in blame games after the attack. Some international forensic teams had reportedly returned home, frustrated that they were not allowed full access to the perpetrators. Initially, the Ministry of Interior said, "It is a possibility that it is an attack by terrorists, so we are treating the matter very seriously." Nairobi Police Chief Benson Kibu called the incident a terrorist attack and added that there were likely no more than 10 perpetrators involved. Senator Bill Okero from Mandera County, Nairobi said, "It's too early to know what kind of people these are, but from what we are getting, these are people who speak in the Swahili language. They are people who seem to know what they are doing, are pretty much organized. It's really quite a shocking thing, because from what we're getting, they aren't ordinary thugs." An eyewitness said that the attackers had told Muslims to leave and that non-Muslims would be targeted. Others were asked to name the mother of the Islamic prophet Muhammad to distinguish Muslims from non-Muslims. They also distinguished Muslims from non-Muslims by asking others to recite the Shahada. To Associated Press, the Al-Shabaab called it a meticulous vetting process to separate the Muslims from the Kafir. Gunmen were seen on CCTV talking on mobile phones and bowing down in Islamic prayer between their attacks. Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Lenku said that between 10 and 15 gunmen were involved in the attack and that Kenyan forces had control of security cameras installed inside the shopping complex. Witnesses who managed to escape also asserted that they heard some of the gunmen speaking either Arabic or Somali. After several hours, Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. According to Kenya's Capital FM, one attacker is reported to have escaped after a witness spotted him mingling with the victims as they were being rescued. Foreign Minister Amina Mohammed said that Al-Shabaab was not acting alone and the assault was a part of an international campaign of terror, and that 2 or 3 U.S. citizens and a Briton were among the attackers. Al-Shabaab are looking for relevance on an international scale, especially after a change of leadership, and is looking to send the message that they are still a force to be reckoned with. The suggestion that there had been a British perpetrator in their ranks was strongly rejected by Al-Shabaab. Kenyan officials later lowered the estimated number of gunmen to 4 to 6 militants. Among the shooters, a military spokesman named Abu Bara al-Sudani, Omar Nabin, Katib al-Kene, and Umar. Norway's intelligence agency, the PST, later announced in early October that it had sent officers to Kenya to investigate reports alleging that a Norwegian citizen of Somali origin, named as Hassan Abdi Duhulo, was also involved in the planning and execution of the attack. On the 18th of October it was reported that 2 bodies found in the ruins of part of the center, with AK-47 rifles beside them, were likely to be those of 2 of the attackers, before it was blocked. A Twitter account claiming to represent Al-Shabaab posted a series of messages alleging that the attacks were just retribution for crimes committed by Kenya's military. "For long we have waged war against the Kenyans in our land. Now it's time to shift the battleground and take the war to their land," said one post. The attack at #Westgate Mall is just a very tiny fraction of what Muslims in Somalia experience at the hands of Kenyan invaders, said another. They warned the Kenyan government that any attempt by Kenyan forces to attempt a roof landing would jeopardize the lives of hostages. Twitter suspended the account before the attack had ended. A group spokesman, Sheikh Ali Muhammad Rage, said, "If you want Kenya in peace, it will not happen as long as your boys are in Somalia." Another Al-Shabaab spokesman, Sheikh Abdulaziz Abu Musgab, told Al Jazeera that the attack was in retaliation for Kenyan troops entering Somalia and that the timing was deliberately chosen to be a surprise attack. Al-Shabaab repeated their demands for Kenya's withdrawal from Somalia. On the day the operation ended, rage threatened further Black Days unless Kenya withdrew its troops from Somalia and said that the siege was just a taste of what we will do. Kenyan authorities arrested dozens of people in the aftermath of the attack, but had not announced any suspects directly related to the siege. On 4 November 2013, 4 individuals reported to be Somali nationals were charged by a Kenyan court in relation to the attack. Identified as Mohammed Ahmed Abdi, Libin Abdullah, Adnan Ibrahim and Hussein Hassan, they were accused of supporting terrorist elements in Kenya, harboring the gunmen in their homes, illicitly registering as a Kenyan citizen, and obtaining false identification documents. However, none of the men were accused of being the shooters involved in the siege, the latter of whom Kenyan military officials asserted had all died. All 4 of the accused men pleaded not guilty to the allegations, with no attorney representing them. The court ordered the men to be detained until a hearing in a week's time. A separate investigation of the attack was conducted by the New York Police Department. The report's findings, released in December 2013, suggested that the attack had been carried out by only 4 al-Shabaab terrorists, all of whom most likely escaped them all alive. However, an investigation conducted between Kenyan and U.S. State Department officials suggested that while there were only 4 gunmen who carried out the attack, they were all likely killed during the standoff. Lt. Kevin York of the NYPD's Intelligence Division also acknowledged that the NYPD investigation, which did not have representatives among the group of Western investigators assisting Kenya with the probe, was based solely on open-source information we gathered and is unclassified. The al-Shabaab member believed to have been a mastermind behind the mall attack, Aden Gara, was reported as being killed after a drone strike on 12 March 2015. Gara was in a vehicle hit by a missile near the town of Dinsour in southern Somalia.